have two highly experienced group CIOs speaking to us, and they just are here. They are also part of our next 100 jury, and they've been interviewing a lot of people who are applicants this year. They have been associated with our IT Next programs for a while, and we requested them to speak on some issues which are of great relevance to people in the IT management. So our first speaker today is Mr. Rajeev Garg. He is Executive Director for Corporate Systems IT for BHEL. He has been with BHEL for more than 35 years, and he's worked in all areas of IT during this time. Whether it is apps, infrastructure, network, information security. He is the group CIO as well as the CISO for BHEL. And he has extensive experience in the area of managing vendors, and so he's going to talk about managing vendor outcomes. And Mr. Garg is by qualification an electrical engineer from BHEL, and he has an MBA from FMS Delhi. So please welcome on stage Mr. Rajeev Garg.
Thank you. Good evening, friends. Today's topic is managing vendor outcome. Now, vendor management for the CIOs today is one of the most challenging areas. People keep talking about application development, we talk about new technologies, but as a CIO, this is one of the most challenging areas because today when we talk about the enterprise risk management, one of the major risks that we carry in terms of implementation of IT is with respect to the vendor management. So, if we just go by the definition, vendor management is the discipline of managing and administrating and guiding products and services vendor in an organized way to drive vendor behavior in order to optimize IT or business outcomes. Now, going forward, Gartner has predicted in next 5 to 10 years, as we are moving towards the cloud and new technologies, one of the key areas where CIOs are going to focus is managing the range of service providers. And you have to look in terms of interoperability of service providers. Like you can't have a service provider lifelong. So the way you manage and then how you switch over between different vendors rather than getting your investment locked in with one single vendor, that's going to be a major challenge. So one of the major competencies or the capabilities that a IT professional today requires is in terms of being efficient and effective in managing third-party service providers. So now when we look into this, managing the vendor outcome, okay, so we have to take a holistic view, that is end-to-end. Simply after a vendor has been selected and he has been awarded a contract, and then we try to manage him for his performance, that's too late. So we have to have an end-to-end approach. It will start from basically doing a risk assessment when you are doing an outsourcing of a project, and it moves towards shortlisting the vendor. Vendor sometimes may be a product vendor or just a services or maybe a subscription services like cloud. And then you go through a process of selecting a vendor, and then you do a negotiation with the vendor, do a contract development, and then you manage him, and then you go for his performance evaluation, and also wherever need is go for a corrective action. So we'll cover each of these things. How much time do I have? Half an hour, okay. So let's start with the risk assessment. So where we are talking as a CIO, many of the companies have this model of outsourcing the software development. So particularly with respect to the software development, we need to first understand our own processes. What exactly we want to do in terms of application development or application outsourcing, in case we are trying to do that. Because that's a major risk. Even in the in-house development, what we find that there is a gap between the user requirement as communicated to the IT team and as the IT is developing that system. And we get into some sort of a iterative processes. something is shown to the user, then again the user is asking for some changes, and then again, so that takes a lot of time also. Even if you have agreed on certain timelines of, let's say, we will do this work in 3 months, it may overshoot by 100% or 200%. Now, when you are doing in-house, many things are in your control, and even other stakeholders may slightly be lenient on you, like finance and other people. But when you are outsourcing, then you have to be very, very, there has to be no ambiguity as far as the requirements are concerned, because your evaluation and your pricing, your costing will depend on your requirements. If there is an ambiguity in the requirement, then you are starting with a failure. So we must have an understanding of our own processes. Similarly, we are talking about the network services, or we are talking about outsourcing the cloud, or we are talking in terms of hardware procurement. There, the challenge may not be that big in terms of defining the requirement. But particularly for software services, the requirement has to be very well defined. So first you understand your own processes, and the bottom line is that the key and core processes should be in-house. There may be some challenge for SME segment, because there the IT team may be small in size. So they may not have those skills to develop those things. So they may look into some other areas, like whether they go for a product, okay, where minimum software development is required. In case they are doing an outsourcing, then they have to do this risk assessment. And there is a concept like now which has come in, like DevOps. So like your team is now, you can't have a luxury of bifurcating in, development team and the operations team. So if you have a small group as a SME, like 4 or 5 persons, the same group is responsible for all the services, IT services, whether it is development, database administration, or it is your software development, and even sitting with the user, training them. So that DevOps is new concept which has come in. Even the Gartner is promoting that. So that is where SME segment can look into this. And then you look in terms of leveraging the external expertise. So that what all you can do with, and do a proper risk assessment. I am sure most of your companies will have a ERM in place, because that's a SEBI requirement, and you have to go through that risk assessment process. So major outsourcing risks are in terms of intellectual property, particularly the organizations which are having IPR. Even if you are giving a AMC contract for hardware, that third party has an access to your data, even on the PC. Now you are maintaining some confidential data in terms of the price and everything. So that, how do you secure that? How that security is taken care? So you have to have a non-disclosure agreement, particularly to have protect your security, whether it is in terms of confidentiality or in terms of integrity of that information. And the other risk which I have not written down is, it is a legal risk. If any third party vendor is working in your premises, you are carrying a lot of other compliance to other legal acts, like labor acts and other things. So that need to be taken care of. Supposing, God forbid, supposing some accident happens in our premises involving some worker of the contractor, in that case all the liabilities are with us. So we have to ensure whether the ESI is in place, PF is in place, and all that has been taken care by that contractor. Otherwise your company becomes liable for that. And also you have to see in terms of the stability of the vendor. Stability means sustainability, long-term sustainability of that vendor, whether that vendor is sustainable or not. So you go through parameters of like his financial health, okay, and in terms of his attrition rate, acquisition and mergers happening. So all these have to see. You will find certain products, certain companies have been acquired number of times in last 5-6 years. So that you have to take a call. I am not saying you don't do a business with them, but you should be conscious about the fact that what is the stability of that vendor in the market. So after doing all this, you have a huge population of the vendors. Okay. Now this huge population of the vendors, You can't be talking to each and every vendor. So you need to first do a first level shortlisting of the vendors. You have to look into the credentials of this vendor. So you have to have a go through the credentials of the vendor. Typically, see, this vendor shortlisting is a process which may differ from industry to industry, from type of organization. Like public sector undertakings will have a different criteria of doing a vendor shortlisting. Most of the public sector and government, they will be driven by something known as CVC guidelines. Okay, so we say pre-qualification. We have to do a pre-qualification. But a private sector SME may be driven by some other consideration of shortlisting. MNCs and the corporates will be driven by. So this is a very generic framework, what we are talking about. But this can be customized to depending on what type of organization you are there. So typically you would like that company to be a registered company, should have a, depending on your operations. Supposing you have a pan-India presence, then you will like that company also should have a pan-India operations. Supposing you are only located, let's say in NCR, then you may not be very particular about these type of criteria. You will look into similar projects. If you are most of the slides are more oriented towards the large companies. So it may not be true for SMEs. So similar projects, so normally large companies will look into the scope, whether a similar project has been done by this vendor or not, what is the value he has executed, what has been the successful implementation, particularly like ERP implementation or application development implementation, whether he has been in some sort of a litigation with the clients, how he has been able to close the projects, what has been, you may take some, references also. You can talk to the customer, do the validation on his closure of the projects. You can see his financial stability, typically the balance sheet, what is his net worth, turnover, whether it's a profit making or not. Now, I don't know how many of you have gone through a bad experience. Personally, I have gone through many of the bad experiences. So we have to be very cautious because you are giving your critical infrastructure on which your business is dependent to a third party. Now, if that fails, you will also fail. That is the bottom line. For example, there is a networking company. You have given your MPLS network to that company, and that company 3 years back was in a serious problem, and today it has closed. I will not name any company. So what will you do? Okay, suddenly it is very good company. Share market also is showing it as a very good. The interview of the CMD also is coming. We are going to be 5,000 crore company in 2 years and all that. So suddenly you are in a problem. Now, if you are a small company or private company, probably you will be able to shift. But if you are, let's say, a government company, it will be very difficult. Similarly, let's say your ERP implementation. Can you change the implementation vendor overnight? Or let's say you have a lock-in with, let's say, some major ERP vendor. Suddenly from 17%, he will say my AMC rate is 22%. You are not license compliant. Okay, so these are the risks you are carrying if you are not doing the due diligence in the beginning. So once we have done a short listing, maybe in some, we can call it as a pre-qualification and all that. Then you get into the selection. What are your timelines? What is the scope? Technical specification, terms and conditions. And then many of these vendors will come with a deviation, even for the product selection. ERP product you are saying, then they will say we are not meeting these specs. You please give us the deviation. So that time you have to take a call. What is mandatory for you and where you can slightly play? Because if you have a very rigid approach in the, no deviation, then you may not get the competitive price. Okay, your competition will be limited. And you may also decide to load for certain deviations. And then the price discovery, once you have done a technical shortlisting, price discovery will again depend on your company's process. Typically in a PSU, it will be a two-part bid, and then after that you open up a price bid. or you may go for a reverse auction. In a private company, you can call all the 3 or 4 shortlisted vendors, and you can do a across the table negotiation and see who gives you the best. So while doing the negotiation and contract development, please involve the process owners. Let's say we are doing some negotiation for a software contract. So I must involve somewhere in the committee the people who are going to own this project or the product or deliverable, because later on they have to execute. Or let's say we are doing negotiation for ERP implementation. So the project manager for the ERP implementation should be involved in this negotiation process, which may be on the value or which may be on the human resource development or maybe on certain deviations. And then you have a service level agreement. They are mandatory, and the penalty clauses. So here you have to play a slightly balancing role. Sometime in our we think we are protecting the company, but may be putting the company to the risk if we put a very high penalty. Can you see that if we put a very high penalty on the vendor, then we in fact are putting ourselves on a risk, because what happens, some other vendor who has a due diligence process at the back end will not come and quote for your product, and some other vendor who will say, okay, we will manage them later on, may quote, okay, and will come. And when you put the penalty, then he will not provide you the services. So penalty has to be as per the market conditions. Market today permit you to have a LD maximum of 10%. So you can't put a penalty more than 10%, 5 to 10%, and you must have a cap. Otherwise, if you have in a contract, you have not put a cap, if someone has accepted, later on you will have a problem in executing that penalty clause. Similarly, on the governance side, you must have a clear-cut role, clarity, who will do what within the organization, particularly on the large projects. And single point of contact has to be there from both the sides, whether it is vendor or it is from your side. It has to be a single point of contact, so there is minimum confusion, and there has to be escalation processes on both the sides, particularly on the service contracts, where you have gone for a MPLS network or for some services. If it is not being delivered in time, how do you escalate that? This is a typical vendor management. So I'll quickly go through this. Probably you would have gone through some exercise on project management. I'm just getting your attention on these of the points which you should take care. That is in terms of the project management, if it is really required. If it is a one-shot delivery and acceptance, fine. Otherwise, if it is a 3 months or 6 months or 2 years project, then you require to have a team in place and have a timelines agreed between both the parties. And similarly, what is going to be his process of invoicing and other things, all these have to be taken care in terms of the vendor management. Another major challenge that we are facing is in terms of multi-vendor integration. Now, supposing we have procured some networking equipment. I'll take an example of a networking equipment. Let's say you have procured switches and routers from Cisco. Till that time, Cisco was there. Now, today, HP is also there in fray, and they have fairly good equipment. Now, if you just go with Cisco, then probably you may not get the competitive rate. So you require to have a hybrid, heterogeneous equipment in your environment. So interoperability becomes a key challenge. So how do you do that? So either at the time of shortlisting, you do a POC, or you put a condition, or you go through a internet or some consultant, do a literature study and see whether that is possible or not. So that becomes a challenge. Even if someone has done it, even the consultant is saying it is there, but when actual execution comes, then there are issues. Then there are issues in terms of the skills. Network, let's say, is being managed by my own people. Now they have been developed on a certain skill, let's say Cisco skill. Tomorrow they have to go on to a HP skill. So multi-vendor integration is one of the key challenges, and then also if some problem is there is a tendency to pass on the buck. You'll say it is from Cisco side or this thing. So mostly in such cases, you make system integrator accountable for that. He should be responsible in your contract that interfacing issues will be sorted by him. This is my existing infrastructure. He has to do the integration. Same thing you can face in the video conferencing. You may have bought a MCU from Polycom. Tomorrow you want to go to Cisco. So those integration has to be taken care of. And if it is a large contract, there are good number of chances. Whatever precautions you have taken, in spite of that, you may get into certain issues and dispute. So that need to be addressed in the contract document itself. So mostly these are standard terms and conditions which you will be putting in terms of arbitration or legal. In terms of before going in fact for arbitration, you must have a mechanism to sort it out at a lower level itself. And the most important part is in the vendor management. Out of all these things is the relationship. So whatever is written in the contract, if you go strictly by contract and have a legal approach, you will never get the outcome. A relationship is very important because many of the things you would like to have in out of the contract. Okay. And if you every time go with a contract, then it will not happen. Similarly, he will also like to have certain concessions from you. So within a boundary, okay, you should be able to give those concessions to him. So relationship at an individual level is very important. You should have that relationship as a CIO to call up a senior management of that particular company on a telephone and tell him that this is the problem. And he should be willing to help you. Okay. So this is a purely human relationship that will count. Now this is the final thing. How do we now do his performance management? One way is to go through the dashboards. Typically in terms of, let's say, this is a very simple example is the network. Okay, network performance is available on the dashboard, and then you may have a backend system where vendor performance, certain KPIs you may put in, and they are continuously being fed into this. Other way is to doing a audit of your own infrastructure with respect to your suppliers or the vendors. The third is very important, that we must have some value-added services, that is leveraging the best practices from vendors. Now these vendors or the product suppliers, they are working with multiple companies. So they have their own practices, plus they have an exposure to those practices. So sometimes you can get the case studies organized to them, visits organized, and see, let's say, for example, I'll give you some example. Let's say, I want to implement, say, DLP, data leakage protection. Okay. Now, most of the IT companies will have some robust implementation on DLP. Okay. I want to do some initiative on employee laptop protection in terms of security, because employee is taking that laptop outside and coming in. So most of the IT companies have that scenario, because people work from their home and then they get the laptop in the company. So those practices you can always understand. They will be very willing to share their practices. Let's say Microsoft. If you want to see Microsoft IT practice, you can visit Hyderabad. They will organize how internal IT of Microsoft is working. Of course, the industry is different. You may be in the consumer side, or you may be on the bank, or you may be manufacturing. But certain best practices you can always pick from them. So these are the things you can do, and certain business case justification, as I told you, from vendor experience you can take when you are making your own new proposals. Performance evaluation. How do you evaluate the performance? So this matrix has to be defined at the time of selection. Mostly it is coming out from the SLA itself. But other than SLA, if you want to define certain things, you can do that and capture that. most of the large companies, like our company, they have a evaluation process continuously for a supplier. We call it at SARP, Supplier Assessment and Evaluation Process. So continuously a supplier is being assessed for that, and he is being marked for that. So you can, depending on how you want to do it, don't make it too big or too complex, keep it simple, but have a process. And then have a transparency in that process. It should not be a subjective thing. It's not a ego based. Some supplier is coming to me every time doing sir, and I am very happy with him. The other supplier is just business like, so I am unhappy with him. So make the process transparent based on the data. And then you record these issues and resolution. Mostly what I have found with my experience is that many of our people, they do a mistake, but they don't learn from that mistake. They keep repeating that mistake. Okay, the same person or a different person. So that record of issues and resolution has to be documented. This is a very tough part. Okay. Otherwise, what happens? A person leaves, gets transferred, so that learning, what he has done by mistake or maybe with experience, also goes with him. So we keep preaching about knowledge management to our users and all that, but this knowledge management part in the IT itself needs to be enhanced. So then is what outcome you are looking in is what you are going to get. So thank you. So if there are any questions, I can take those questions now.